While others celebrate the wins,
Yes.
we celebrate the mud.
each episode has a special guest.
Tony-nominated actress, Broadway's Lily Cooper.
Tashir Zameda.
David A. Gregory.
Getting messy with muddy topics.
We are going to be talking about grief journey.
With hilarious moments
Now get over here.
And deep conversations.
I'm ashamed to even admit this, but this is what happened.
This is Into the Mud.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Into the Mud podcast. While others celebrate the wins,
We celebrate the mud. We are here.
we always giggle in this intro.
We always giggle because it's hilarious.
It's so funny.
We're here at the Barrel Lounge in the mall in West Village. I'm Alex Kumin,
And I'm Drew King.
and we're here with our lovely guest today, Alison Leiby. Here, so uppity in here, so chic. It is. Right? It's nice. It's elevated.
Yes.
It's lovely. It's
We're spending millions of dollars just for the wallpaper.
Yeah, I can
And
tell.
this yellow couch.
And this lovely yellow couch, which I like.
It's
It's
a
coordinated with
very-
in kind of a tonal way.
You really
You
did.
have
I
a
love
nice
it.
buttercream.
Yes.
I love that.
It's a vintage Jones, New York from the 90s, like 100% linen that I got in Toronto.
I was gonna ask. So this is. I'm usually. Vintage. I'm a vintage
Always.
gal. I love it.
I
It's my
love
favorite
vintage.
thing.
90s vintage is all I ever want to buy.
It's the only thing anyone should ever buy.
I agree.
This is currently on the rack at H&M, so if you're into fast fashion, I'll be returning this tomorrow and you can jump grab it.
Will never be vintage and will also like be vintage immediately because like everything that's at H&M like will never disintegrate.
Exactly, yep. It's going to be in the stomach of a whale
Yes.
within like a month.
Yes.
Hot.
Yes.
Yeah, hot.
Hot. We are so happy to have you today. You have okay, so just a little backstory on how we know each other through the comedy world, comedy, New York existence. You have done literally everything. You're a
your resume is
writer,
stacked.
a stand-up, a producer. You were producer on Hulu's Life and Beth. You were producer on Miss Maisel.
Yeah.
Did you write on that as well?
Yeah. I wrote on both. I was just at the producer step.
The producer. Oh, look at that.
Yeah.
Excuse
It's
me.
just a way you can like codify getting more money and then be like, I didn't do anything though.
Make the cash.
Amazing. Get that money.
Yeah. and then,
But you have done a ton of stuff on Hulu Comedy Central. You also did a phenomenal solo show. Oh God, a show about abortion that was running at Cherry Lane Theater.
Yeah,
Is
right
that
on the corner.
still?
Love the Cherry Lane. Oh my God.
It's so
my
good.
favorite. I mean, like R.I.P.
So
Now it's owned by A24, and it's always up in the air, like what they're gonna do with it, and if it's gonna be like an actual performance space or just like somewhere that people get to view their movies for more money or something. But my favorite place ever. I'm not doing it. I'm kind of like pushing pause on like what to do with it until the election is over, because like while I wouldn't say that the show inherently has like much politics in it at all, aside from being about reproductive choice. I don't talk about the politics, but I'm like, it would change because I want to put it on tape. And I'm like, well, it will change the tone of just like a few sentences if we're in a Democratic or a Republican administration. So I'm just going to like wait until we get through that. And then I'm going to like go back in and be like, all right, let's put this out there for the world.
That's so fascinating.
It's so weird.
That was such a wild, because that came out right after or before?
No, before.
Can you tell us about the timeline of that?
Yeah, it
how
was,
that all happened?
and I'd been working on it. I mean, I'd been like working on the show and like met with my producers who were like, Cherry Lane, let's do it. And like, I was like doing a show March 4th, 2020. And then that coming, and I was like, I'm never going to get to do this show. And then things opened up and I was redeveloping it or like continuing to develop it. And then we kept kicking it down the road because there was like, there were different COVID waves that were kind of stopping live performance. And then just the scheduling of the theater, you need to be able to have enough time like that. It really does need to get planned a lot in advance. It's not like one night. It's, a month and a half minimum. And then, so we ended up spring 2022. So it went up March 26th, or no, April 26th or 28th. I forget what the first day was. So like opening night was the Monday after the leak for Dobbs. And then it ran through, obviously the actual decision coming down and abortion being no longer legal in many places. And then ran kind of throughout the summer because it got this like bizarre bump that like I have to like always kind of navigate my emotions around because I'm like, well, I'd rather that stuff just didn't happen.
Yeah.
objectively, like,
course.
I would trade every dollar I've made on this show for that to not have happened.
Yeah.
But I'm like, well, at least, you know, this was there to like give people a place to kind of like dump some of their emotions and to like be able to like laugh and like take a break from like the horrors of what all of those, you know, of what that ruling and the subsequent laws have become. But like, it was just this like weird thing where I was like, oh my God, are you so excited? I'm like, well, not really. No.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm horrified and like don't really know how to like live day to day now as a like person with a uterus in this stupid country that hates everyone. But then I had to be like, well, a small silver lining to like have to just like remember and take away and be like, well, I think it helped. I think there were people who felt seen and people who understood, you know, who learned stuff from it. And I'm like, great. I mean, again, would rather not have done.
Right.
Yeah.
It's so good though. It's
thank you.
And I can't wait for whatever your next step is.
Yeah, it'll carry on in some way. But I'm like, let's just get through November. You know, no idea when this comes out. Hopefully, if it comes out after November 4th, that it's like a good thing.
A good thing. Yeah. Fingers crossed.
What seasons of Maisel did you write on?
3 and 4.
Oh, okay. I danced on season 2 for 2 episodes.
Fun.
Yeah.
They did so much cool choreography and so much like of that stuff. And I'm like, here's a dumb joke for her to say. Like, you guys are busy making beautiful television.
You were as well, though. You're right.
I mean, sure. But
was that fun? What was that like writing for stand up in another era? Like, what was
so
that?
like
so
there's
weird,
so much that you don't even like acknowledge is part of modern life that didn't exist even like 20 years ago, but like certainly for like the 50s and 60s, like phones, no, like most TV kind of navigation like isn't real. Like even just like the way that cars were part of culture, like the words that get used, like there's just so much that you're like, oh, it was really different. And like, so you would have to like kind of go back to basics of like parents, dating, like clothes, like and that stuff, and really try and like find stuff that doesn't have like any modern elements to it, because it's so easy to like write about texting or like write you know, like the thing or like
swiping.
my computer or like what, like just being like, oh, Apple, oh, like, you know, and it's like, oh, none of that exists then. And so it was kind of like that, like getting over that hump was really hard, because I would like think of stuff that was relevant, like, and then be like, oh, but she can't say that because this is 40 years before that thing was invented.
Yeah. And even the tone and the quips, those are like that we can just quickly throw into right now. You have to insert your brain into a different time period.
It's just a little different. So it was fun to like have to exercise that part of my brain and then be able to go out and do stand up at night and be like, my fucking asshole of a, you know, just like, real, like, just like
literally,
ways that,
my
like,
fucking asshole.
My fucking asshole. My guy.
Women are allowed to say that now.
Yes, no, yeah, and there was like a lot of like, oh, a woman wouldn't say that in public, then,
right?
Even if she would have had that thought,
even if she was a comedian,
a
you know
comedian,
what I mean?
right?
Like,
it still would have been this like line that can't be crossed, and you're like, oh, what a weird time. Is it better now? I don't know.
I mean, could be. But so you've had this kind of incredible career of doing lots of writing and producing and performing and all this stuff. And what we wanted to talk today about was just sort of like the muddiness of like just, I guess, like the instability, because you talked a little bit about moving from New York to LA and like job insecurity. And we want to talk a little bit about how like identity and home shifts throughout career.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about moving to LA and about how that shifted some of those concepts for you.
Totally. Because like I started doing comedy, writing, everything here in New York. I moved to New York like right after I graduated. I've been here ever since.
What year was that?
2000. I think I got here in 2007. I graduated in 2006.
Okay, great. Yeah.
So
awesome. I got here in 2005.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So fun era.
So fucking better than you.
being here in the pre-2008 like heyday of like everything was amazing. Fashion's night out.
Everything was 24 hours.
Everything was 24 hours.
Yep.
Everybody had so much money. Even if you didn't have money, you still kind of had some money in a way that like doesn't feel true now. So like my identity in comedy, I thought was always like very tied to I was a New York comic. I didn't start somewhere else and come here. Like I started here. And I always like the jobs I had like the shows I ran at UCB. Like I ran like 2 big shows at UCB and like all this stuff. And I felt like so much of my comedy identity was New York. And when I would visit LA, I was always like, this is fun, but I don't get it and I don't like it and I don't fit here. But I was living in Harlem and had this like fabulous studio apartment that I loved. It was in Morningside on 113th and Frederick Douglass.
Nice.
And it was just this like great, like couple studios in a little building, so nice. And then I got a letter one day that was like, we sold it. You have to move out. And I was like, I don't know what to do. I didn't have it. I was freelancing for Comedy Central as a copywriter by day. And then just doing all this stand-up, but I had been rejected. I had been like submitting packets for shows and just not getting jobs. And I was like getting meetings. Like I met with Seth. I got really close and then just kept not getting them. And I was like, I still couldn't get booked on like, you know, I couldn't get passed at a club. I couldn't, but I was like, but I work every night and like do all this other stuff. Like, I don't understand why does it. So I was like, maybe this is the sign to like go to LA where like there are more TV jobs and there are more people kind of like doing this stuff. Like maybe this is the moment. And people always say like, don't wait for a job, just go.
Yeah.
You've heard that advice like about LA. I don't know if that's like still advice anybody says about Los Angeles.
I've heard it, but it sounds like a nightmare to me.
Going without a job. And I had like,
awful.
and I convinced Comedy Central, like, let me go part-time. I'll work like the morning and like be able to do like, it was an easy job. And they were like, yeah, this is probably a part-time job anyway. So like, sure. And I was like, okay. So I had like some some stability,
bit of foundation,
a little bit of money coming in, and then some other freelance writing. But I was like, oh, I'm going to go out there and they're like, this is going to be it. My luck is going to change. And it was like, I would say, and I try not to be the person that's down on LA because like, I do like LA. Like, it's nice. It is objectively a night. Like, you live there. I think we actually met there.
I never lived there, but we
Maybe
might
you
have.
were visiting.
But I was probably visiting.
At like, what was that? Genghis Cohen? Is that the Chinese Jewish restaurant?
Yes.
I remember
sounds
seeing
amazing.
There were shows there. I think it was maybe like Blair and Greta or something. I remember I just remember meeting you there for some reason. I don't know why. Like we barely spoke.
I remember that. I know. Oh man. Thanks, LA.
Yeah.
That's all you've given both of us.
One weird fusion restaurant that I've not been to since. I never did that show again after that, and I lived there for a year.
Real.
I like LA. I think it's nice. It like I get like some people's reasons for going there, and there are lots of jobs there, but like I lived there in like I think like the darkest, aside from maybe right now, period of my creative life. Because like I thought like, all right, this is gonna change the tone, and then I went from like living in like what I consider I'm not a born and bred New Yorker, but I'm an East Coast gal, and I've lived here for now 20 years almost. And I was just like,
boat shoes on.
I've got my boat shoes on. I'm from Annapolis.
I was like, Nantucket?
I've got my boat tote. I've got my boat shoes, and I haven't been on a boat since I took the ferry like 3 weeks ago. But if you have a boat, I want to go on it.
We
All of
do
us.
too.
But
yeah.
yeah, can we
us take
invite
us
us
on
on a
a
boat?
Let's go on a
Please let us come on a
fucking
boat. I'm dressed for it always. But like I thought like, oh, this is gonna shake some stuff loose. I'm gonna meet new people. I'm gonna do new shows, and like all I ended up doing was like losing like what I did have going on, which was like being booked a ton on shows in New York and feeling comfortable just like navigating the city and I have lots of friends here who are from my pre-comedy life. So like I had people outside of the incredibly toxic community that is the entertainment industry.
What do you mean?
You mean they're not all nice?
What do you mean?
So it was just this really dark time, and I was submitting, I think I did 25 packets in a year. And I met
packets for those who are listening who are not familiar with packets. So anytime there's like a late night show, potential writers have to create a packet in the voice of that show and submit it to be considered as a writer for that
and like
show.
some of them are like, just give us a page or two of monologue jokes. And then some of them are like 15-page, like research heavy.
Yeah.
The Daily Show is very different than the Tonight Show, which is very different from like a new studio show that's like about sex or what so it was just all this different, and I kept like getting meetings and not getting jobs and getting meetings and not getting jobs, And then Comedy Central was like, we can't keep paying you. This isn't a real job anymore. And I like didn't have that. And I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And then I finally got a job back in New York for the President show. And it was my first like real long term. I had done like little jobs that were like 2 months on this, or like it's a few weeks of this, but it's not even full time. Like, and it wasn't like enough to like join the guild. Like I had done some non-union stuff and like whatever. Right. And this was like finally like my job that got me back to New York, and then really like took my like writing career to like the next level, which I had been like spending like basically the last 2 years just clawing. And it is one of those things where you're like, oh, you've done so many things. And I'm like, well, there were also years where I could not.
It was this many years.
Could not get hired. It was like years of developing a voice and understanding how to like navigate things. And then also just, it's so many no's. Like it's so many.
It's mostly,
no's. It's almost
mostly
all
no's. And I think that, and it's mostly no's in a feast or famine industry.
Yes.
And so when the no's happen when you're in a good place, at least you can kind of keep your head afloat.
Yes.
But when you're in that period of famine, when you're in the like the jobs aren't coming, you're not even getting in the room. You're not even, or the packets aren't coming.
Right.
Or whatever.
When the packets aren't coming, you find out someone else did a packet. You're like, I didn't know they were hiring.
I didn't know they were hiring.
Oh my God.
The no's get really overwhelming in that period of famine. And I want to talk more about that and like how because you said that was like the first, that time in LA was like kind of where you're at now.
Yeah.
And you said you're in a bit of a creative lull.
Yes.
Right.
Or
so
I'm
career lull.
Career lull. Yes.
Creatively, I feel like kind of, always just like some stuff makes sense and some, but like career wise, and like what was so hard about like getting all those no's and like not getting these jobs is I didn't have like a stand-up scene that I was a part of that I could go kind of like blow off steam or feel useful or feel funny or feel validated, which like that's not necessarily what stand-up is for, but it is what it does for you sometimes as like a performer.
Yeah.
It's a community.
Absolutely.
It's a community to go to where you go, you will, all of you know exactly what I'm going through right now.
Yeah. And like,
you all get it.
And like, you just know, like, you have like a terrible day of like doing all kinds of other stuff and you're just getting like, like, you didn't get this, like, this is a no, this is getting bumped down the road indefinitely. And then you can go out and like kill on a silly bar show and it still like will like bring you back like a little bit to baseline. Mm-hmm. And the LA scene, you've been out there, like it is harder to break into. It is much smaller number of show wise, but much bigger geographically. So like, it's not like there's
you
like
really do 5 sets a night.
Yeah. And like, you don't know, like if you get to a show and like no one's really hanging out, like that's it. That's the night. Like, don't like it's not like, oh, I'm going to run, I'm over near CYSK. I'm going to bump over there. And like, like it is just like this super isolatory. And I like visiting LA and I have lots of friends there, but like I didn't like the life there. I'm not a driver. I mean, I do drive and like I grew up in the suburbs, like I drove and I just would prefer not to. And I couldn't understand the layout of LA and I always was like lost and I just like panicked on the freeway. Yeah. And just like was not, it just like, and I was probably like not in the right mindset to like learn how to drive in a new place at that point. And I hadn't driven in 10 years. Like, and so it was just like, I'm a walker. I'm like a sit alone at a bar gal. I'm like, all of the things that like made New York comfortable and were the places that I would be able to kind of like recover from constant rejection were like just completely gone. And it was just like being alone. I was like sharing a house with this woman who was very nice, but like, and we were friendly, but it wasn't like a friend of mine. Yeah. And I also didn't really feel like I had the alone space to really be alone because we were sharing a little house and it just was so tough. And like now being in a similar moment where I'm like, oh my God, where are the jobs? Like, when are they coming? What's going to happen? Like everything feels like a mess. I'm like, at least I'm in New York. I'm able to like be like, oh, I'm going to go see my non-comedy friends and like have dinner with them. Or I'm going to take a super long walk down to Red Hook and like get a burger at Red Hook Tavern and have like some alone time. But then if I want to, I'll just like swing by a show at Union Hall on the way home or something. Like that stuff is like, for me, what makes me work. I know that's not everybody's way to kind of like recalibrate, but it is mine. And so like to take that away when you're in a tough spot, I really feel, I'm like, wow, that was like looking at it now from this perspective where I am in my creature comforts and my like home comedy space. I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I like made it through that year. Genuinely.
It's such an interesting, the concept of home.
Yeah.
And because this is something I am starting to discover about myself right now, is like identifying what makes me feel comfortable and what makes me feel at home.
Yeah.
And how to create that no matter where I am.
Yeah.
Right. So like I was just in like Vegas for the last week, and then I was in Chicago for 3 days before that. So I was like 10 days away. And it's like that might have like really like thrown me off my game recently. But I now know I bought a little collapsible electric kettle. So I can have tea or instant coffee in my room right when I wake up. And being able to do that and sit and journal first thing in the morning, like that just fundamentally changed how I started every single one of my days. Was like, oh, this is a thing I do at home. This is my routine.
Yep.
If I'm at a nicer hotel and I get to go to the gym, or I get to go take a walk somewhere, or just bringing some of the stuff and identifying like, this is what makes me feel at home.
Yeah.
Really changes, because I think based on what we do, and not just in entertainment, I think anyone whose concept of home has to change a lot or changed a lot
if
growing
you have
up.
to travel a lot, or even if you just like aren't like, I know there's people who, I mean, and especially now, people who's like, they have a job in the city they live in, but they have to run all over the place all the time. And it's like, okay, how do you create like consistency that makes you feel comfortable and not just like constant destabilization?
Well, and it's also a process of just getting older and getting to know myself better, where like I wanted to ask, when you were in LA that first time and you were feeling so discombobulated, like were you able to identify like, I don't feel, New York feels like home.
Yes.
This place does not, and here are the specifics? Or was it more of like I don't like it and I can't figure out why?
I mean, it was like half and half. Like part of it was, I was like, objectively, it's nice there. I have lots of friends. Like I should be able to like this at least a little bit. And I couldn't. And like, I went back to New York 4 times in 11 months. Like I was like, I want to go home. And like, I had a wedding, and then I had like a 3-week job back in New York, but it wasn't enough to like move all the way back. And like, so it was like this thing where I kept, so I also like, I will say, like, I kept going back, and the comparison kept being fresh, as opposed to like finding a way, finding a way to like really root myself in LA.
Yeah.
But I knew as soon as I got there, like week 3, I was like, oh, what I like is living in New York. Like, that's that's my home. I've always lived on the East Coast. I've lived in New York my whole adult life. Like, this is what I want. And the one thing that did help me was not trying to recreate New York and LA, because I realized like I tried different things of like, I was like, I'm going to go out to dinner by myself, which is my number one activity here in the city. And I like took an Uber alone, and I was like, oh, this is like not what that experience is supposed to be. It's supposed to be like, oh, I'm walking, or I'm taking the subway, or like, I'm at,
or
like,
I stumble upon look at this cafe.
Like, I'll just pop in here. And instead I was just like, why am I on the freeway? Like, with a stranger, and I'm paying them? Like, what is this?
I just spent $90 to get here.
Yes, to have like overpriced whatever. It was, I mean, LA has good food. I will give them that. But like, the one thing that like made me that wasn't a part of my life in New York, but was a part of my life growing up, and is I was a competitive swimmer for like the first 10 years of my life, and like was like 6 practices a week or more, like very intense. And I haven't swam like since I was like 15, 16, when I like left my team. And it was like really tough, but I love like just the act of swimming. And what LA does have is like a lot of space and weather for pools year round.
Yeah.
And my friend took me to the pool just to like hang out one day, and I was like, there's so many lap lanes. I was like, should we swim some? I didn't even have goggles or a cat. Like, I was just like, I just want to get in and swim some laps. And I started swimming like 4 or 5 times a week doing laps. And it was like the one time where I was like, this is me feeling like me right now. And like, this is giving me the same feeling of the things I love in New York, like walking. Cause like, you can't look at your phone.
Yeah.
You can't talk to anybody. Like, you can't listen to music. You're not like listening to a podcast and you're like, how am I not booked on this? Or like, you're not like being nostalgic in a sad way because you're like Fiona Apple. Like, what, like, it's, which are the two experiences that my headphones give me.
I love it.
But it was like, oh, it is this like completely like it's white noise for 45 minutes. Your body feels amazing afterwards. Like it is like good for like I'm not a hiker. Like I'm not a big yoga person anymore. Like I was like, what do I do to participate in like the wellness of LA that people seem to really respond to?
Yeah.
And I found this and I was like, oh my, and like since I've moved back, I belong to the YMCA and I swim again. And it was like, LA did get me back to this thing that I love. And so like, I do feel like that was a benefit of being there, but I was like, oh, I can't make New York in LA. Like I'll never recreate.
Yeah.
I could hang out with my New York friends who moved there all day. It's never going to feel like New York.
Yeah.
But how do I make it feel like at least I can like survive here?
Yeah.
And that was the thing. And now like, what you're saying about like finding ways in other places to feel home, like now like as a YMCA member, not to brag,
No thanks, Equinox.
but like YMCA's almost always have pools, and they're in most cities. And so when I'm on the road, I normally am like, I was in Richmond and I was like, oh, the YMCA is walking distance from the hotel near this club. I'm going to go swim. And like, when I was in Nashville, I was like, there's a YMCA with a pool that I've swam at before. I'm going to go swim. So like, like that has become this like, you know, when I'm not in New York, like a thing that I do to feel like centered. And that came from LA.
We have so much instability in our careers in this business. I'm a performer. I do musical theater, blah, blah, blah. That's my world. But it's all the same parallels.
That simple.
It's the same parallels of like, we're on the road, we're not on the road. Like sometimes you get to go to LA for a job, sometimes you're in New York. It's all this up and down. There's so much instability. But yeah, it's deeply important to be able to find those pockets of home. I like, for me, like one of my recent things is I used to fly fish a lot as a kid, which is so strange. I'm so fucking butch. But like I have an ex-boyfriend of mine for Christmas bought me this beautiful fly fishing rod for Christmas one year. And I was like, oh my God, this brought me back home. Like this is, because it was my similar white noise. It was my swimming. It was being able to be like, okay, like in the midst of all this chaos of being like audition and dance class, like if I can just like get on the Metro North and go upstate and just like fish for a day and just be like, okay, cool. I don't get to do it that often, but when I get to do it, it's like, But being able to find the pockets of space that make you feel like you're back home.
Yes.
And maybe, like I feel similarly. I'm an East Coast kid.
Yeah.
So are you.
Yeah.
Like we're all East Coasters.
Yeah.
And
It's a different vibe.
I don't jive with the West Coast. I like visiting. I especially like going like just for a couple days. Like it's nice to experience it, but like my like just
Your
being
DNA
does
is
not
like-
work there.
Yeah.
It is not for that. It is not for like if I'm at a coffee shop, I'm like just so annoyed.
Literally.
I get so anxious when I'm just like in a store.
So
Like,
funny.
it's just, and I'm like, and it's not like it's better or worse. I'm like, it just doesn't match.
Yeah.
And to be able to like have things like, so to have lived there for a year and made it is impressive enough that like I didn't end up like in jail or something for like assaulting someone.
I say this all the time. It's the color palette. This is so strange. There is a very blue-green color palette to the East Coast.
Yes.
That's New England. That's Annapolis. That's the East Coast. It's blue-green. And then you go to California and it's like brown, red, orange, which is beautiful. But like my body, my home, my internal home is blue-green. Because when we studied abroad in Spain, we studied abroad in Seville together. I remember being like, for the first 2 weeks, I was like, gorgeous. And then after 2 weeks, I was like, but it's fall and the leaves aren't changing.
Yeah.
And it's hot.
Destabilizing to
And
not have like,
everything is dry and there's no green. I had like a panic attack about it.
yeah. I also like really don't like being very far away from being able to see water. And I know like everyone's like, LA, the beach. And I'm like, well, if you live in the West Side, like maybe, but like I lived in Silver Lake and like, sure, the reservoir sometimes had water in it, but not really. Like I was like, I don't like feeling landlocked. I get super, super anxious with that. And like, I felt like it's both like LA feels like to me very like isolating and also very claustrophobic, even though it's all space. Like, because I feel like I'm like, I can't see the water. Like in New York, I can see the water. In Annapolis, I could see the water. Even I went to school in Ithaca at Cornell, and like it is in the middle of New York State, but like you're on massive lakes that like, you know,
Yep.
the Finger Lakes are huge.
Lakes and gorges.
Lakes and gorges.
Yeah, exactly.
I just need to see water.
Yeah, I completely agree.
So in terms of like just the ups and downs, the not feeling at home, the feeling at home, something that, again, sort of, and you said that it took you a while to like you start to get those jobs, start to get the, have, in terms of like how creativity is tied to you when you are feeling like, do you feel like your creativity kind of goes at like a pretty even keel, or does it, depending on where you're at mentally, like how?
I think it like goes up and down. I wouldn't say that it's even. I would say that the waves are like consistent. They're unpredictable, but like if I'm feeling uncreative, I now know that it is temporary. Like, and that it's like, oh, you are either depressed or just exhausted mentally from being creative for a long. Like you can't just like I believe, and maybe this isn't everyone's experience, but like you can't just like fire on all of the cylinders you need all of the time indefinitely until you stop working. Like there are times when like, and I feel like grateful that my career has let me be like a writer who like writes for TV or like writes all kinds of like stuff that like doesn't need to be performed. And then also I write for myself as a performer and do this kind of thing where you're like performing but not writing necessarily. And like there are times I feel like sometimes I'm like, oh, all I want to do is like write this script. I'm so in. And I know, or like I'm on a job where I know that like, okay, I have to clock in every day and write jokes for this television show. And like I find that like in a lot of those eras, like times my stand-up creativity feels really just kind of like not there. And I'm like, oh, I'm not really inspired very much. Sometimes it's still there. And I'm like, I've got jokes all day and then I got jokes all night and I can't wait. And like, sometimes I'm like, maybe this is just a writing period. And then when I don't have a job, sometimes I'm like, okay, maybe this is just the stand-up period where you focus more on stand-up. And there are people that work in both of those things more consistently that I think have harder opinions on like, we should always be doing all the stand-up or you should always be in a, like whatever. But I find that like mine goes really up and down, and, you know, my mental health is connected to, you know, if I'm having a really down phase, like it's not exactly when I'm like, I have an idea for a show. Like, I'm like, should we pitch? Like, that's like not, you know, like I feel like the last like year or two for me, just like with the way the industry has been and the way the world is, I've been feeling very low in comparison to other parts of my times of my life. And I've found that like, it's been more of a kind of a push up to try and be creative. And I can usually kind of like get myself into it. Like, it's like, if I'm not doing a ton of stand up or writing, it's like, okay, this phase can't last very long. Right. Just financially, it's like untenable. Yeah. But I find like it is pretty tied to what I'm doing, and it kind of just it hums along, and like, I'm never like, I can't imagine writing something or like, or saying something funny, like for more than a day or two. Like, then I'm like, okay, if I sat down with that essay I'm working on, I bet I can get into it today. Or like, if I just went and did a spot, I'm going to make sure that I do like 2 minutes of just like riffing or something new, and I can get there. Like, so it stays kind of consistent in like something will happen, but I also like started to learn like, you can't force yourself, or I personally can't force myself to sit down and write for 3 hours today. Sit down and have 5 ideas. Like, I guess I could make myself do that, especially if somebody was paying me to do that and there was an accountability element. But like, just for my own actual like creative juices, like I have to be like ready to do it. And sometimes I force myself because I have to. And sometimes I'm like, I don't know, maybe this week you just kind of chill out and take in more art than you create, and go to a museum, watch a movie, like do something else, talk to a friend.
I love it. That makes me feel so good to hear.
I know. I have to tell myself sometimes.
Just the idea of like creativity coming consistently as waves.
Yes.
Right? Like this idea that like expect the dips and know that they are temporary, and know that you're not always going to be sitting in them, but also don't put so much pressure on yourself to just, I used to, even in the last couple of years, switching out of that mindset of like, you have to be writing and performing stand-up all the time, and then also this, and this. And then when it doesn't come out, you just get into this loop of, well, you're not good enough, or maybe you're not meant for this, or you don't have any good ideas left. And it's like, I took a week off at the end of August after being very burnt out for very long, and I told myself, like, don't even pick up a notebook, like, don't look, don't think about it. And I didn't for a week, and I got back, and the second day after I got back, it was just like pouring out of me, and I was like, oh, that's the thing.
It's like, I mean, people say like, you know, it's like a battery or whatever. Like you need to like, you can't just like constantly like be like charging it to like 10% every day and like being like, this is fine. Like let it charge all the way up. Like let it kind of let your brain. And like, sometimes I feel like when I'm in a grinding, like I'm doing this, I'm not like part of the society. Cause like you're so like focused on like, I have to make this. It's like, oh, like watch TV, like call a friend, like
go to a museum,
like just walk around for a while. Like you have to like be like taking stuff in to have any thoughts. And I've always found like the hardest time for writing is when I'm like, all I'm thinking about is writing. And it's like, oh, well, nobody wants to write about how hard it is to write. Like there are lots of books on that and some of them are helpful, but like, that's not like, that's not a career. That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to like write funny things or like insightful things. And you have to have like funny and insightful thoughts in order to create that kind of art
and experiences that you can talk about.
Correct.
Like that's the,
you got to fill the well back up again.
Exactly.
Yeah. Can we talk about those ups and downs that come with creativity also, as we know, come with career landmarks? That it's, you know, I have a lot of friends that work in the corporate world where they're like, I'm interviewing for this new job, but I don't want to take it because it's a lateral move. And I'm like, Jesus Christ.
Imagine getting to take a lateral
move. What a gift. Oh my God, if I could go from a Broadway show to a Broadway show, oh my God, what a gift.
Yeah.
But I'm like, because we don't have those, you know, it's a 1 minute you're writing on an Emmy-winning show, and the next minute you're catering, and then the next minute you're working on, I don't know, some nonprofit
volunteering at a nonprofit
thing.
Because
and
it's
then you're
good.
back
and then you're seasonal at the Gap, and then you're, you know, which I'm
so
like,
how do you weather those career landmark ups and downs and peaks and valleys, because we don't really have upward mobility? It's not like I wrote on Maisel and now I get to work here and now I get to work here. It doesn't work like that.
And it certainly doesn't now in comparison to like 10 or 15 years ago, what it would be for a lot of people. Like it is a lot bumpier now. And there's just a lot that's different about the entertainment landscape. But I think that like I learned a lot. Like my run at Cherry Lane was like really, really a big deal. And it wasn't until I was like out of it that I even like could start processing how big it's like. Anna Wintour was there. She emailed me.
I literally thought of that photo.
You know, and it's like David Byrne came and it's like, and that's
so cool.
And
amazing.
And that's just the celebrities. And that was really cool. But in the moment, you're just kind of like experiencing it. And like the show is so to do a an hour-long show that is not just I have to do an hour of stand-up tonight, I'm going to figure it out. Like, you know, I know mostly what I'll say, but like I get to fuck around. Like there's no fucking around. It was a lot of like the memorization took me like the first 2 weeks of the show was like I was so focused on having it locked in.
Yeah.
But also still not sounding like I was reciting a memorized hour, which was like, so it was like so just and then to be kind of processing the realities of the politics around the show in the middle of that run. Like I just couldn't understand how big a deal it was when it was happening. And, you know, and it was like written in all these places and I got to do all this stuff and it was so exciting. And like the fall off after that was really, really, really hard. And like, it was something I didn't see coming because like, one, the show didn't have a natural, like the trajectory didn't have a natural end that I thought was correct. You know, like it becoming a Netflix hour, like that didn't happen. And and that's a different podcast.
That's part 2.
But like, but you know, I think like there's both like the narratives that you try and like map your experience onto. So I'm like, oh, well, if you do this thing, you do this run and then you get this deal and then you do this show and then it comes out and then you get nominated. Like, and it's like, that wasn't the course this is taking. And it went from being like, I felt like the most popular girl in New York for the entire summer to nothing happened. Like nothing, it didn't go.
The cavalry didn't come.
And it's like, I know that I have gotten opportunities because of the show. I know that my writing on Life and Beth was certainly because that show was so popular and because the show was good. But I personally don't feel like it like was a clear just like, and now you go do all of these things. Like it did kind of go back to zero in a way that I wasn't ready for, and had never, all of my successes had kind of been like, I wrote on the President Show, it got canceled. I wrote on the Opposition, it got canceled. I'm Comedy Central poison. And just kidding, they don't make TV anymore. No, they kind of do. Like, and it was like, and I was like, and then went to Maisel, and that was exciting. And then like Maisel was over, but then it was like, and then the pandemic, but it was like, I felt like things were kind of like incrementally going in a direction. And then the show kind of took me to this place and then just kind of dropped me from a really high height into nothing. And part of that was also the landscape of like, we were getting ready to strike.
Yeah.
TV landscape had been changing. The show was the show, and it has its own problems in terms of like having a long life, because there are people who are afraid to touch the topic of abortion, even if they're like, this was good and I agree with you. They're like, but what about? And it's like, I don't know. So it was, I mean, it was, and it's still something I'm processing, and still something I'm just like working through of like how that felt and how it feels to go from like, and this is such a smaller scale than I think what like some people experience, of being like the toast of the town in Hollywood, and then nothing happens. And then you start climbing up again. And it's not, we don't talk about it a lot because we assume, I think a lot of us lose track of somebody's success, and you're like, oh, you did that, so clearly like you're doing fine.
Everything's
like,
great and fine.
And it's like, no, the reality is like, again, I'm like, I don't know, maybe I'll like work at a cool store this season because I need some money.
Yeah,
That's
there
the
are
thing.
jobs.
It's like the money stops coming.
The money's
in,
and like and
it's
even the
not-
opportunity, like it's like people are like, oh, that show was really cool, but then like kind of nothing. And it was a really, like, I would say that like the last year or two kind of coming out of it, just that, separate from kind of all the other stuff going on in entertainment and the world, has been like a really tough thing that I'm still, I think, in the mud over. Just like, how do you, and then to have like this one thing that was like a very identifying thing of like, oh, you did your show. Your show was the thing. That's what you do. That's what you did. And like, how do I not be seen as like the woman who talks about abortion, but then also still want to use the fact that that show was probably the biggest thing that's ever happened to me, to like make sure that it like takes me to another level, but then not wanting to be pigeonholed as like, this is what I talk about, because that's not all I talk about. I do lots of things. And it's such a, it is a mind fuck and a half. Like it really,
there's so much more I want to dig in. We have to wrap it up, but right, like that statement right there, just like being pigeonholed. But I also think it's important. That's the biggest thing you've done until now.
Until now.
Right.
Until now.
Yes.
Until now, there's so much more. And I think, we've talked about this as well, but just disengaging your identity from the work you do is so important. And like really taking the time to be like, hey, pat yourself on the back for a job well done, but this is not who you are.
Yes.
Because when
so
that
much
fall
more.
happens, that's also not who you are.
It's pretty brutal. It's like a tough, like, I was like, ooh, and like nothing happened. It's not like everybody suddenly was like, we hate the show and you.
No,
it was just like,
just
oh, it just ended. And it's like, that's over now. And like, there's no real way to process it. And I've been working on that, but I'm happy that I'm going through it here in New York.
Yeah.
And not in LA.
Oh my God, yeah.
having that.
Where I like have.
You're able to do it in home.
Yes.
Yeah.
And like I can, go do the things that make me feel comfortable. I can go see my friends who like have nothing to do with this absolutely abusive industry and the way it makes you feel. And like
Abusive.
No, I just,
Yeah.
it's fine.
Oh my
I
God.
love.
it's totally fine. So
We're in love.
I would say that makes me like really great, like that element of home. I'm like, okay, it's like there will be more of these. Like this is not, I hope there are
100%.
more of these, because it
Absolutely.
means other stuff has happened.
Yeah.
But again, I want to do it at my real home here, and then I'll visit Los Angeles to see my friends and get stupid tattoos, which is all I do there.
Perfect little button. Perfect little button. Thank you so much for chatting with us. That was beautiful. We have a quick our 10 little rapid fire questions just to wrap up the
Hit
episode.
me. I'm excited.
This is our favorite part.
Go.
Okay, you go first.
All right, here we go. Ready?
So
just as
top of your
fast
mind
as
as quick as you can. Go.
Roller coaster or Ferris wheel?
Roller coaster.
If you were a vegetable, what would you be?
Celery.
Who is your favorite cartoon character?
Snoopy.
What was the last thing you ate?
A salad.
You can only ever drive a school bus or a clown car. Which do you choose?
Ooh, clown car. I can't make the turns in a bus.
Favorite character on Maisel?
I mean, Midge.
Okay, rank these cheeses. Gouda, Swiss, Brie.
Swiss Brie Gouda.
Okay, Kill, fuck, marry. Alaska, Texas, Montana.
Kill Texas, fuck Alaska, marry Montana.
Work. What's the cuddliest wild animal?
A koala. They hug.
Would you rather eat 50 hot dogs or one skunk?
One skunk.
Wow. Okay.
And I like skunks. I think they're really cute. Just
They
to be
are
fair.
cute, but
But
they-
I'm not the biggest
smell.
hot dog
Don't like a hot
person.
dog. Not a dog gal.
okay.
I know. But I like a sausage, so you know, it's we all contain multitudes.
Oh my God.
Alison Leiby, you're the absolute best. Where can our listeners and viewers find you?
You can follow me on Instagram and now TikTok. I'm like dipping my toe into TikTok
Dip
just
it,
before
baby.
it goes away, probably.
Yeah.
At Alison Leiby, ALISONLEIBY. And you can listen to my podcast, Ruined,
Yes.
wherever you listen to podcasts. My very good friend Hallie ruins the plot of a horror movie for me who won't see them. So like every episode is a different movie. And she's like tells me like
can't
everything
wait
that
to
happens because I'm like, I will never see it. Please spoil it for me, but I will read the Wikipedia. So that's more fun. So
Great.
that's Ruined Podcast.
I love it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're the best. Thank you, guys. Give us a like, a follow, a subscribe. We'll catch you later.
We love y'all. Bye.